is one of my main goals was to join to show people light in a dark world. And I hope I did that. And if not, I'll get better at it. But that's my goal every day. I pray and I ask God, show me somebody.
Doug, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did life start for you?
Life started for me. I was born in Travis Air Force Base in California. My dad was 20 years Air Force, and I was born out there. Then came back here and lived in a tumble the whole time until I joined the service. My mother died when I was 5, and I didn't find out till years later that my dad was in Vietnam at the time. And him and 3 other guys' jobs were to stack up the dead American bodies when the enemy hit it. And Red Cross was really good at getting dad out of there and saying, hey, your wife is passing away. You got to get back to the States. And they replaced him with the guy. And while my dad was flying back, they got called out and all 4 got shot down and died.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's kind of how it all started.
So was that the impetus for you to join the military?
No, I played a year of college football. And it didn't work. And I have trouble reading and comprehending unless it's a book about one particular person. So college is a lot more reading, and football didn't work out in college. Always knew I was going to have a labor job, and I thought, well, my dad did 20 years Air Force. I can go 3 in the Army, and that's why I signed up.
Okay. So how long were you in the military?
I was in 3.5 years. I went in October of '83 and ETS'd out in March of 87.
For those of the, sorry to interrupt,
No,
but
you're
for
fine.
those that are not military savvy, what is ETS?
ETS is the estimated time out of the service.
Okay.
Your time is up. Sorry about that. So I went to basic training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and we actually had our drill sergeants through our AIT training too. Sometimes your AIT training is at another base, but this one here was artillery, and we had them for 13 weeks. And then from there, we went as a package platoon to Korea, and I was 15 miles away from the DMZ, and got there about 1:30 in the morning. It was wintertime, and I thought I should have studied more in school. But I was there a year, and then I got sent to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and did my last 2 years there.
Okay. And about what time frame was this?
1983 to 87.
Okay. How was you said you did a year in Korea. What was that like for you?
It was a good eye opener for me. I needed it, and I adjusted better than I thought, and I think all of us did, because when you don't have a choice, you just deal with it and move on. But I realized how spoilt we are in America when you live a year in Korea. Learned a lot about their culture, and yeah, I believe that a lot of third world countries, the men from the age of 18 to 22, they have to serve their country for 3 years, and Korea was that way. So they called them katusas, the Koreans we worked with. They was actually going to college too,
Okay.
but we had to sleep in the same dorm room with them and everything else because we're protecting them, and they appreciate it. So
Okay. When you came back to Fort Bragg, what was your mission at Fort Bragg?
same thing, artillery.
Okay.
And after I left, I thought Korea was bad until I got back and got to Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg was more of a show post where colonels always come by. Everything had to be real pretty and nice and tidy. We kind of liked the laid back part of Korea. We was just there to, train more in case a war would break out type thing. So, but it wasn't bad. I mean, I needed all of it. I needed to grow up and be a man, and that was the best opportunity I had.
Sure. So you did 3 years and got out of the military. What happened after that?
I actually was 3.5 years, and the only reason there were 6 more months, I had both of my knees operated on when I was in the service, and I wasn't done with the physical therapy on the second knee, so they had to involuntarily extend me. So 3.5 years. When I got back, there wasn't a whole lot of jobs around here, and I got on at the cable company, and I was scared to death of heights every day, but I needed a job. Back then, you didn't need a job, you went and got a job,
Sure.
And it was kind of comical because it was $3.35 an hour was minimum wage, and they paid me $4 an hour, so I really thought I had it made. So I was there 2 years, almost 2 years to the day, and then I was making $5.59 an hour on a Friday, and I quit to become a mailman. And the very next day, I started at 11.26 an hour being a mailman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, what happened with life after you got your job as the mailman?
Well, became a single parent, and had two daughters. And that comes with its own struggles. And looking back now, I wasn't always the best. I was got to where I drank a lot. Had a high tolerance of beer, but looking back now, I probably shouldn't have drank as much. But the whole time going through life, when we get older and we look back, we in a way needed to do all them things to get us to where we are right now. Years go by, I tracked down my fourth grade sweetheart, and all I knew is she moved out east after high school. I hadn't seen her since high school. So I went to the house that she grew up in, and it was placard because I was going to try to get the number if the mom was still living there. And both her parents were deaf. So the neighbor seen me leaving. He goes, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm trying to get this to call the oldest child here, Martha. I went to school with her, and I hadn't talked to her in a long time." And he goes, "Well, I got her number. You want to call her?" And I said, "Sure." So I called her. We had a 6 months long distance relationship. She was a sign language interpreter at a school, and she had already been divorced, and she always wanted to come back home. And we're both on our third marriage, and we celebrated our 22nd wedding anniversary last June. We dated 10
Congratulations.
days, and I never took her out on a date, Mark. And we've lasted 22 years.
Well, it sounds like it was kind of meant to be
It
then.
was meant to be, that's for sure.
Good, good. So you marry your grade school sweetheart. What does life look like for you after you guys find each other again and you get married?
It was a journey that I didn't know that I was going to go on. We knew just by talking that it was meant to be, even though we was talking on the phone long distance. The struggle for her before she moved back, she was already a Christian, and I wasn't serving the Lord. So deep down, I kind of knew I was thinking about Jesus a little bit more. The last time I thought, I was an elementary kid, a bus kid going to church, and I told her I'm at the point in my life where I need to go back and figure this out. Sometimes we just know there's something missing, and we can't. A lot of times we try the wrong places to try to figure out where that is. And I said, you go 2 or 3 different Sundays, different churches, whatever church you find, that's where we'll go. And it took about a year because I'm a man and I'm stubborn.
Of course.
My biggest problem, probably waiting so long, spiritually, is when my mom died when I was 5. I remember in fourth grade being at another church, and this elderly lady raised her hand and said, "You guys prayed for my ankle last week," and I didn't even have to go to the doctor, and people were clapping and praise God. And I thought, why would God take my mom at 5 years old? She was only 28, never smoked a day of her life, and died of cancer. So I was mad at God. And then the more I went to church, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I quit listening to man, and I kept trying to listen to Jesus because I felt something changing in me. And so I thought, man, if I'd ask 15 people a question, I'd get 15 answers, no disrespect to them. And then finally, one day, I didn't even make it to the altar, and my life changed. I came home, and I told Martha, I said, I'm going to go in the bedroom and shut the door because I got to learn how to pray. And I asked God to forgive me because I heard my mom's voice right before I got saved. And I said, if you take my alcoholism away and my hurt and pain away, I will serve you. And that's what I've done ever since. Okay. I'm always a work in progress, and will be till the day I leave the earth. And that was a big change for the marriage and everything.
Okay. So fast forward a few years, and I don't know how many a few is. Maybe you can enlighten me on this. You became a military chaplain for funerals.
I joined the Honor Guard in June of 2010, and I was on the Honor Guard and became the chaplain role as the Honor Guard, but not the actual chaplain for the VFW and Legion at that point. And every year they vote officers in, and they voted me in one year to be chaplain. I am so blessed. I've been on a lot of teams in my life, and to be on the Honor Guard is by far the best team I've ever been on, just because of what we do, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and we know every time we're riding to the cemetery or to Reese's to do our military rites, we know one of these days that's going to be us,
Yeah.
you know.
So can you just for clarity, can you describe what that honor guard does?
Yes, usually Bill Reese will give me a call or one of the other funeral directors and say I'm meeting with the family and it's going to be a veteran service. The funeral's on this day at this time. Can you guys make it and tell us where the burial is? And then I have a group text. So as soon as I get off the phone with that, I send a group text out. Hey, here's the date. Here's the time. We have a service. So if the funeral starts like at 1 o'clock, we'll say at Reese's, and then the burial is going to be at Shaw. We'll be at the Legion early. We lower our flag half staff during the service for the veteran, and then we load up our weapons, which are blanks, and check the bugle and get everything set. And then we try to get there about 20 minutes before the procession gets there, so that way we're in uniform. When the casket in the code, as soon as a casket moves coming off there, we're supposed to go to attention and present arms. But with the older group of people that we have, we wait till the casket gets a little bit closer because the weapon's 9 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
and to hold it in one spot too long. So, and then once the casket's on the rollers and the people come up underneath the canopy and into the chairs, that whatever funeral director's in charge that time will give me a nod. And then I have a ritual that I have memorized that we're paying respect to not only the veteran and the family, but to the flag. And as I'm folding the flag, I'm reciting a ritual to the flag and what the flag means to everybody. I'll present that to the next of kin, give the next of kin a slow salute. I come back and I have another paragraph that I have memorized, and then I'll turn to where the honor guard goes, and then I'll salute the guy calling commands. I'll say, Sergeant Arms, salute our departed comrade, and then they'll do the 3 round volley, play taps. We give them a sympathy card my wife came up with about 4 or 5 years ago now, and anyone that's on the honor guard that day signs it just to make it a little more personal.
Mm-hmm.
And if you open up the card, it has a folded flag with 2 hands on there, and on the right side of the page, it has the actual words "two taps."
Oh,
So, and
I
then,
didn't know there were words to
yep, I
taps.
didn't either till about 2 or 3 years ago. So, and then we give them the empty shells. And what we do to stay away from family drama, so to speak, for lack of a better word, the empty shells go to whoever I gave the flag to.
Okay.
That's the next of kin, then they disperse out however they want to.
Okay.
And then we go back, we put the flag back up, we download the weapons and put the bugle back and wait to get the next phone call. I've been so blessed in so many different ways, Mark, and you got to know me the last 4 years, but I'm on my 15th year and I got my book updated. I've been keeping track since I started, and I have 950 veteran funerals
Wow.
under my belt. So I tell people I got the best job in the world, even though that sounds kind of twisted, but I get to give that flag to the next of kin every single funeral.
Yeah. So one of the things that, as I've gotten to know you over the years, you have been kind of a storyteller for the mouthpiece, so to speak, for a lot of these folks that have been in the military, been in war, and you've been able to tell their stories just a little bit when they haven't been able to. Would you mind sharing some of those
Oh,
stories?
I'd love to. I won't say names on some of them. I
Sure,
will
that's
on
fine.
others just because of certain stories that go along with it. But how it all got started, I prayed 3 nights in a row one time before the new year started. And I was asking God, what can I do to make the world a better place? And I didn't hear nothing. And when people say they heard from the Lord, it's not really a voice, it's a thought that you know it did not come from you. You know what I mean? So I didn't hear nothing the first 2 nights. And the third night, it was almost not quite an audible, but it says, go to nursing homes and start visiting veterans, is a thought that came to me. So the next day, I went to a nursing home and I said, the lady says, can I help you? I go, I'm not sure. I go, you're going to think I'm weird, but I prayed 3 nights in a row. I'm the chaplain at the VFW American Legion. I asked God, what can I do to make this world a better place? And he shared with me to go visit veterans. I said, can I have a list of all the veterans you have here? She goes, I sure can. I'll never forget. And this was 12 years ago, 13 years ago. I seen the list of veterans and I didn't know any of them by name. And she goes, which one you want to go with first? I said, well, I don't know any of these. Why don't we start at the top? So she walked me down, introduced me to this guy, and we small talked for a while. And he said, hey, next time you come and visit, we'll look at my photos. I said, okay. And there's something about the word chaplain to a veteran. There's automatic trust, whether they know me or not. So that helps, especially starting out. So about 5, 6 days later, I went back and visited him again, and it seemed like he was a little more tired than the time before. And I don't even think we got to the photos. And he shared with me a story, and I think really looking back now, that's how it triggered that everybody has a story, and everybody's story should be told. He said, you know, he said, when I got divorced, it did my heart so good that my ex-wife's family still was friends with me. And the reason, to most people, that probably don't seem that important or such a good thing, but the next 2 times I went to visit him, he slipped and he couldn't talk or nothing. So the only thing that I really remember was that story.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a hold of the daughter who I did not know. And I explained to her that I only got to visit out of 4 times. The other 2, he couldn't talk. But he shared this story with me. I'd like to share it at the funeral because someone at that funeral needed to hear that. So I went, and that's how it all got started. I shared that story. I said, I don't know any of you. I said, but I really feel that someone needed to hear this story from him because that guy was 84 years old. I told him. I only met him 2 weeks ago. He could have told me anything about his life, and that was important enough to him on the second visit to share it, so it's only right that I share it with you.
Okay.
And that was the first one. Naturally, I can't tell you all of them, but I wrote some down that I think that other people that's going to listen to this need to hear. I interviewed my pastor about 6 months ago, and me and him are good friends. I texted him after church. I said, I want to hear your story. And he texted back and he said, are you sure? Yes.
That sounds ominous.
And he said, the last time I shared my story to a counselor, that counselor needed counseled. So I texted back and said, all the more reason. So, and me and him joke around a lot like you and I do. And so I go out there a couple days later. He set some time for me, and we talked and joked a little bit. And I said, okay, we're fixing to get a little serious now. I said, you can only share what you want to share. I'm not going to try to make you say anything. I said, do you know why I want to hear your story? He goes, no. I go, your story shouldn't be told for the first time at your funeral. And too many people, that's what happens. So it's my goal now, and when I get off the council, I'm going to get more in depth on hearing people's stories and writing it down. There was a gentleman I knew for 30 years, and a buddy of mine called and said he was out at Good Sam. This has been 5 or 6 years ago now. And I met this gentleman 30 years prior when I was a mailman. And after our first visit, he says, hey, there's 2 things I will not talk about, and that's religion and politics. Good for me. And we've been friends ever since, and of course life went on. We didn't see each other as much, and then someone said he's out at Good Sam. So I went out there one night, and I said, I went out there one day, and he was just starting to sleep more, and there was 2 bottles of Miller Lite, and half of each one was still had beer in it. And he was sound asleep, so it was like one of them moments in time where you got to absorb it. So I just sat there and I looked at him and I looked at the two bottles and I looked back at him and I thought, all he wanted to do was feel like a man one more time. A couple dead nights later, I thought I want to go in the early evening when there's not as much hustle and bustle, and they had put him in the courtesy suite, which means typically you're slowing up. And so we had a good visit. His nickname was Mac, my nickname's Mac, and we was visiting. And I said, when we met 30 years ago, you said there's two things you won't talk about, and that's religion and politics. He goes, that's right. I said, you're a very sick man. And I said, I'd love to tell you about Jesus in heaven. And he said, no. I said, okay. We continued to talk and visit. And he had asked me a week prior, would I officiate his funeral when he passes? And I told him it'd be my honor. So I cried most of the way home thinking no one ever said no at a time like that. And I got to the door to leave that night and he goes, hey, Mac. I turned around and I go, yes. He goes, remember, at my funeral, don't talk about Jesus. I want you to talk about me. I said, out of respect for you, that's what I'm going to do. The next day I went to pop in on him and he was asleep. I didn't want to wake him, so I was leaving. Another pastor was putting birdseed around the windows of the patients so they could see the birds come and eat. And he goes, who are you here to see? I go, oh, I'm here to see so-and-so. And he goes, I led him to the Lord this morning. I go, now how'd you do that? I talked to him last night. He wanted nothing to do with it. He said, I just told him, brother, you need to swallow your pride. You don't have much time. And 4 days later, he passed away, and I got to share his story at the funeral. I have Smitty the barber. I can say his name. Me and him became pretty tight. He had the old barber shop there on the corner of Osceola and Albee Road. First time I visited him, he was still cutting hair in his 90s. And he was sitting in the barber chair, and I was sitting in an old lawn chair, and I was getting ready to leave for him. And I said, do you care if I come back on a regular basis now? And he goes, I'd like that. About that time, a car pulled up. I said, hey, Smitty, someone just pulled up. He said, well, got me a live one. And he stood up, cut the guy's hair, and we got pretty tight. He said when he got out of the service, the day he graduated basic training, World War II was declared over. So they didn't know where to send all these people. So they sent him to Korea, and he worked in an in-processing and out-processing building for a year. Then he went to barber school, and it cost $300 in Des Moines to go to barber school back then. 1950, I think he did it. And he said...
Wow, that was expensive in 1950 dollars.
He worked in a restaurant, busting tables. And if he worked a double shift, they always fed him a meal. And that's what he ate. He ate one meal a day while he was going to barber school because he couldn't afford anything else. And they let him sleep in a little apartment upstairs. His last test, you'll like this, he had to bring somebody up and he had to cut their hair, and it was a live haircut. So he went home and he asked his dad. He goes, Dad, I need one person to go up there to get my certificate. Will you go up and let me cut your hair? His dad had never left the town of Bloomfield his whole life, and he went up there and let Smitty cut his hair. And then Smitty speeded up a little bit because I got a lot of stories about Smitty's. He fell. He was at Pennsylvania Place and the nicer places behind there. And he went out to the hospital, and I went out to visit him, and he knew he was slowing up. He was mid to late 90s at that point, and me and him were like father son, and he looked at me and he says, any way you can get me out of here? I go, no, Smitty. I go, I can't get you out of here. He looked at me and he says, you're going to have the honor guard at my funeral? I go, the honor guard's going to be at your funeral. You still go officiate it? I said, yes, I'm going to officiate it. 3 or 4 minutes go by and it's real quiet, and he looked at me and he says, am I going to die here? I go, yeah, buddy, you're going to die here. He says, will you stay with me? I go, you betcha. I said, I'm going to run home for a minute, make a sandwich and tell Martha. And I went back, and he passed away at 3:15 that next morning. And it was probably one of the saddest things I've seen because I got so attached to him. But before I go any further, I have to say, then I'll quit crying, or I'll try. Is all this started, and the rest of the stories I'm going to tell is because I prayed 3 nights in a row and asked God, what can I do to make this world a better place? So knowing him was a true blessing, and I do miss him because I got so attached to him. I met a World War II guy one time, and he was sharp as a tack. He remembered everything about World War II, but he couldn't remember what he had for supper. And the one story I'll share about him is he fell in love before he got drafted, which a lot of them did. And the lady that he fell in love with, she says, we should get married before you take off to war. And he looked at her, and he was probably a teenager or right at 20. He goes, I'm not going to do that to you. What if I don't come back? You're too young to be a widow. She waited 4 years for him, and they got married when he got back from the war. And I thought that was a cool story. Another gentleman, and I don't want to say his name, no particular reason, but he was 99 years old when he passed away. And all he ever talked about was how he played baseball when he was younger, and he wished he could still play baseball. I said, what position did you play? He goes, I was a pitcher. He said, but I played anywhere in the infield. I said, oh, okay. And he kept bringing that up. So I went and talked to the activities director, and I said, hey, is there any way that you can take me and him to a little league field? I'm going to get a baseball, and I want him to throw one more pitch. And Martha and I was on our way to watch here, and we stopped at a rummage sale, looking around and didn't see nothing like. And all of a sudden there was a basket. There was 2 baskets leaning up against the garage, and they had, fake flower things coming out of it. And I seen an old baseball in there. And I said, this baseball for sale? She said, I didn't even know it was in there. It's an old beat up one, I go, what would you sell it for? She goes, I don't know, $1? I go, I'll give you $1 for it. Then I explained to her what I was going to do. She goes, I'm not charging you for that. Take that baseball. So I went back, and I was able, they took me to the ball field, and I told him, you're going to throw a pitch one more time. And I wheeled him up in his wheelchair, got him on the pitcher's mound. I didn't go very far. I go, now throw it to me. And he picked it up, and he said, this is too heavy. This ain't a baseball. I said, you haven't thrown a ball in 70 years, man. It's the same weight as it was when you played. So anyway, he got to throw it to me a couple times, and I went and got him some ice cream at the One and Only Grams, and then took him back. So that was a pretty cool story. I think he passed away like 6 months after that. There's one gentleman still alive, so I'm not going to say his name. A buddy of mine called me probably 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago. And he said, hey, he goes, next time you're out at Good Sam, go to all the way at the end of this hallway, and there's a veteran in there, Vietnam veteran, but he sits in the dark all the time, and he's really hard to get a conversation going with. I said, oh, my kind of guy. So I went there the next day, walked in his room like I'd known him forever. I said, hey, I'm Chaplain Doug McIntyre. I heard you was here. I said, everybody has a story, and everybody's story should be told. I go, what's your story? He goes, have a seat. Sat down. We're sitting in the dark. The guy looks like Charles Manson, no exaggeration. And I'm sitting there thinking, what did I get myself wrapped up into? And we're small talking, and the word chaplain, he opened up. Real raw. He's still pretty raw. He back in the 60s, he was a drug addict, alcoholic, the whole 9 yards. And he said his parents were really mean to him and beat him all the time. And he said it was mainly his mom because his dad was an over-the-road truck driver. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and he said, I was 17 years old and she kept beating me. And I grabbed her arm and said, if you hit me one more time, I'm going to kill you. And he had the look on his face that he would have. I said, what'd she do? He goes, she never hit me again. And so we're still sitting in the dark. And I said, you care if I come back and visit you on a regular basis? He goes, I'm going to tell you, like I told the chaplain here, you can come back anytime you want to, but don't you dare pray for me. I said, oh, that explains the darkness. I said, I get it now. I said, you know what? I'm going to respect the fact that you don't want me to pray for you, but I'm going to pray for you when I get back into my truck. I said, I'm real sorry that you was treated that way, and it wasn't right. I said, but God only made one of you, and the last thing He wants you to do is stare at four dark walls until you die. I shook his hand. I go, I'll see you next time around, buddy. 3 days later, I showed up. His blind was open a little bit. The bathroom door was open a little bit with light. And little by little, it lit the whole place up. Now the lights are on. He has the main door open and they can see. So as time went on, I shared with him, probably 9 months later, I said, he goes, what are you doing tonight? And I said, well, later on today, I said, I'm in the Christmas play. I said, I got to go work on my lines. He goes, you believe in all that stuff? I said, well, there was a time in my life I didn't. So I wanted to let him know that I had a bad life too. So we have something in common here to help the bond. So I shared with him and he just nodded. And then about another 6 months goes by and he said, he brought it up. He goes, do you really believe in that stuff? And I go, yes, I do. I go, it kind of sounds like you've been thinking about it. And he kind of nodded a little bit, you know. And I said, I tell you what, I'm not one of them guys that push people. But if you're doing their own thinking about that, you just keep thinking. And then when you're ready to talk and do the sinner's prayer, you just let me know. And then he just stared at me and he didn't say nothing. So I finally looked at him. I said, why don't we do it today? You got nothing but time and your health is starting to fail. And he did the sinner's prayer. And since then, he goes to the cafeteria now. That he used to always have his food come in there because he can't deal with people. And there's times when I go there to go visit somebody else, he's sitting in a break room area with other people, not talking with them. And it's just cool how when it works on their terms instead of someone else browbeating, you know.
And sometimes people just need it on their terms.
Yeah, we do, especially men. You know,
Because men are stubborn. We
yeah.
suck.
We are stubborn. We don't slack. We're just stubborn. I went to a rummage sale. It probably had been 3 years ago, and didn't need anything. Once you get used to going, you just go, you know, thinking you're going to find that one treasure. And there was nothing out on the driveway. It was on North Court, like you're heading to Tractor Supply, that little frontage road there. I walked up the garage, nothing. And then I looked in the garage. I stepped in, and off to the left, it caught my eye. It was a really old Navy uniform. And it had been hanging out there so long that it has dust on the shoulders. So the lady was waiting on somebody giving her change back. And then when she got done, I looked at her. I said, hey, ma'am, by chance, is that Class A uniform for sale? And she looked at me. She started tearing up a little bit. And she goes, it's not for sale, but I'll give it to you. I go, no, ma'am, it's worth a lot more than that. And I said, I'm the chaplain at the VFW and Legion. I said, it just kind of caught my eye. And she said, well, that was my dad's. And he was never the same since World War II. And that's why I have it out here. It's time to get rid of it. I said, well, I'll be glad to pay for it. She says, no. She goes, you see on the other wall of the garage? You see the other one over there? And it was another Navy one. I said, yes, ma'am. She says, that's my husband's, and he hasn't been the same since he got back from Vietnam. She said, it's time. Like that. She said, the last 2 weeks, my husband has to stay in the house because of all the fireworks and all the trauma he has from it. I go, well, unfortunately, ma'am, in my line of work, I hear that from time to time. She goes, hang on tight because there's 2 white hat that goes with them. I'm going to go in and get them and I'll be right back. And I said, okay. And when I turned back to look at the second uniform again, there was like a 17-year-old kid there just standing in awe. He was listening to this conversation that lady was having with me. And I looked at him, I said, young man, I go, you just impressed me. Most kids your age don't get into that stuff. It don't mean nothing to you. I go, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you that one. He goes, are you really? I go, yeah, you can do anything you want to with it. But the one I'm taking, I'm going to put in my man cave. And every night before I sit down to watch TV, I'm going to look at that and realize how blessed I am. Never seen that guy again, but he had himself a uniform.
Okay.
Um, Another gentleman, I seen him at North Hy-Vee parking lot one time, and I know him. Went to school with his daughter. He'd come in the club once a day just to sign the book, and he was getting up in the age. And he says, "Doug, you got a minute?" And it's the parking lot at North Hy-Vee. I'm so blessed. I said, "Sure, I do. What do you got?" He goes, "Me and 6 other guys got drafted to go to the Korean War," and he said 6 or 7 of them left and went to California, and they was waiting on a ship to get sent off somewhere. And there was a whole bunch of people, but there were 6 or 7 of them from Ottumwa. He said we had to wait 3 days for that ship. And the third day the ship came in, you know how the back of it opens up.
Mm-hmm.
And he said there was 400 caskets with 400 flags draped over there.
Oh my.
And he said that's where they was going. So about 6 months after that, I seen him. He was walking out of the VFW as I was walking in. He goes, "You got a minute, Doug?" I go, "I told you I always got a minute for you." He says, "Well, in 1996, I told my family, and I wrote Reese Funeral Home and said, when I die, I don't want no funeral. I don't want no military rights or nothing. I just want it to be done." I said, "Well, that's you're right." And he said, "But I was at that graveside service yesterday that you did for my best friend, and I changed my mind. When I die, will you officiate my funeral?" I said, "Under one condition." He goes, "What's that?" I go, "You got to die before me." And he started laughing. About a year later, maybe a little bit longer, his daughter called me and said, "Daddy don't have much time, and he wants to die at the house, but we just got him set in on a bed, and he said he wants to see you." So I went out there and prayed with him, and 3 or 4 days later, he died, and I had the privilege of officiating his funeral. I met a guy one time at the Veterans Affairs. Every now and then I used to go in there and check my identification card or drop some off or whatever, or talk to a veteran that's waiting in line. And I'd never seen this guy before. So I shook his hand. I introduced myself. I said, "You got an appointment today, huh?" And him and his sister was there. He had told me later. He goes, "Yeah, I just got diagnosed with ALS. I got 2 years to live." He goes, "I'm only 58 years old." I go, "I'm so sorry to hear that, man." I said, "Hey, I'm the chaplain at the VFW and Legion, and I go visit veterans." I said, "If you don't mind, I want to take that journey with you a little bit at a time." He goes, "Sure." So I went once a week, and to watch someone pass away that way, man, that will pull at your heartstrings. Me and him became pretty good buddies, and I was there when he took his last breath, and 3 or 4 days later, I had the privilege of officiating his funeral and giving the flag to his wife. Yeah, when you asked to interview me, I had to go back to all these stories, man. So they're all coming back to me. So bear with me. The uh, the one gentleman I shared with you the last time I visited with you, I'll say his name, Don Schaefer. I always thought it was a made up name. His nickname's Radar, and and then I found out one time someone had called me and said that he was in a nursing home, and that's where he'll probably stay. And so I go out to visit him, and then he started sharing his whole story that he grew up here in Ottumwa, but he grew up in foster care. His mom died when he was 5 years old, and dad became a drunk and a womanizer, and he was showing signs of tuberculosis. So back then, they took the kids during the summer out at the county home because fresh air and sunshine was the best therapy at that time. And so the second summer, he was still showing signs. So he went back out there again, and no one came back and got him. And the people didn't know what to do. So he's watching all his friends leave with their parents. And so they called the state, and he went into foster care. And he said the last foster home he lived in, they made him live in a chicken coop, and they fed him one day, one meal a day. He said, "I joined the Army just to have a bed to sleep in." So I thought, I got to start bringing my notepad, because this story's. And he ended up doing a career in the military. He was a chaplain, and then he ended up being a spy for the military. And he couldn't share none of them stories naturally. But so his first year in the Korean War, he was and he was a clerk in a company unit with two doctors. Hence, that's how the show MASH came about. Him and one of the doctors became pretty good friends when they served there that year. And in passing, one of them had said, "We should make a TV show out of this." And nothing happened for years and years. And then the second tour in the Korean War, he was a chaplain, and he was in charge of this great big prison that had 150 North Korean prisoners in it. And one day the prison caught on fire, and no one had told the young soldiers if something like that would happen to push this button to at least open the cells. So it was 200, I'm sorry, all 200 of them died in their cells by fire. So radar called an engineer battalion, and that commander came up and he said, "Sir, I want you to bring some men up here, and I want you to dig a hole long enough, deep enough, and wide enough to bury these 200 North Koreans. I'm going to do a funeral for them." And he says, "You realize they're North Koreans?" And he said, "The moment they quit breathing, they was no longer my enemy." And he did a funeral for all 200 of them. Years go by, he gets drafted to Vietnam. And one Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, anybody that was anybody, rank-wise, was in their Class A's, and they had a great big party at this hotel in South Vietnam. Radar and a couple of his buddies were the gophers. And one commander said, "Hey, we're running out of this liquor. I want you guys to take your motorcycle and go get some more of this liquor." And when they came back, they parked right in front of the hotel, and the enemy bombed the hotel, and everybody in there died, and them two were standing there.
Jeez.
So when he got out, he moved out east and opened up churches up and down the East Coast. And he looked at me when I was visiting one day, and he said, "Hey, when it's my time, will you officiate my funeral?" I said, "It'll be my honor." He goes, "No, it'll be mine." So we visited a little bit longer, and he says, "I know what day I'm going to die." I go, "You do?" He goes, "Yeah, I know what day I'm going to die." And he was acting just as good as he was any other day. He wasn't actively dying or nothing. So after that visit, I called my pastor. My pastor was a chaplain in the Army. I go, "You got to meet this guy. This guy's story is just unbelievable." And so the very next day, pastor and him visited for a while. And I usually don't go every day, Mark, unless I know they're getting close to dying. And I try my best not to let a veteran die alone, which is, I know it's impossible, but if I can be there, I want to be there. So the next day, I'm backing out of my driveway, have no plans to go visit him that day. And the Holy Spirit stirred in me and said, "When you get there today, his door will be shut and he'll be gone." Nothing like that ever happened to me, so I thought, I'm going to be obedient. And I drove there and went down the two hallways, and his door was closed and he was gone. So I stood in the hall just trying to soak it all in, and CNA came out after 2 or 3 minutes. He goes, "I'm sorry, Chaplain, didn't they tell you?" I said, "Yeah, I heard in my driveway." And the nurse came out and she said, "He told me over the weekend he knew what day he was going to die." I go, "He just told me that too, just the other day." And she said, "We brought breakfast to him this morning, and he was talking to his daughter and out east. And he said, 'Just set it there. I'm talking to my daughter, and when I'm done, I'll go ahead and eat it.'" And they said, "No hurry. We'll come back later to get the tray." So they came back later. He was dead. They turned and looked at the calendar that he marked every day, and that day wasn't marked. 4 days later, I got to officiate his funeral, and I shared at the funeral that I go, "Some of you guys are probably thinking, why in the world would you say all that about that man?" And I said, "It's simple. It's his story. When I officiate funerals, I tell that I start out with everybody has a story, and everybody's story should be told." I said, "And those of you that don't think you have a very good story, there's something in your story that's for somebody else. It's not for you to keep, you know." Just the other day, I went to Fairway, and a good buddy of mine I haven't seen in a long time, he was at a funeral of Hank Harper's when I officiated Hank's, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him that day. So I seen him at Fairway, and it was probably 5 years before that I seen him. We used to play on the same men's slow pitch softball team. So he said, Hank Harper's funeral. I go, yeah. I go, that was the tough one. He said, you know, and his eyes started to water. He goes, I sat behind your wife. My wife and I sat behind your wife at that funeral. And when you said everybody has a story and everybody's story should be told, he said, it stuck with me. I told my wife on the way home, get online and buy me a book because I'm going to start writing my story down. And he says, Mac, he goes, I tell you, he says, if I die tomorrow, there's only one paragraph in that book, but if I live 20 or plus more years, my family's going to know my story. He goes, I lost a lot of family members and I never did know their story. So through 3 nights of praying, this this is how this journey's going for me. I'm humbled every day and blessed. It's not always a I'm not gonna say fun because it is fun, but it can be a lonely walk. And there's days I got to walk out back. We had a span one time 5 6 years ago. We had 6 veteran funerals in 4 days, and after a while that stuff kind of wears on you, you know. But I always bounce back, and the Lord blesses me every day. But the stories can go on and on and on. But them are the notes I have. But if you got questions about, oh, I forgot one, if you don't mind. This would have been probably 8 10 years ago. Will Reese was still really involved in funerals at that time. And he came up to me at the cemetery and he said, hey, Doug, is there any chance that you can give the flag to the next of kin? She's really, really sick in a wheelchair in a van. And I said, sure, I can. I didn't know the crowd knew that that's what I was going to do. I thought he had just came up and asked me. So you know where the canopy is, and the roller and the casket, and then the chairs. Not one person sat in the chairs while I was doing the ritual. They lined up on each side of me, from me all the way to the van.
Huh.
And when I walked up there one step at a time, I thought, this is like a movie scene, man. I am so blessed. And I got to walk up the ramp, present the flag to her, and I came back down the ramp, gave her the slow salute, went back and did the rest of the service. Some of them you remember a little bit more than others, you know. There's a comical one, if there is a comical one. We had 2 funerals almost back to back, different funeral directors. And the first funeral lasted a long time, and it was in Eddyville. And we had to get back to Memorial Lawn. So one of our honor guard members couldn't make the first funeral, but he can make the second. And the first one was long. So he gave me a call. He said, are you guys en route? I said, this just got done. We're going to fly down the highway. He goes, they just pulled up. The procession did. I said, well, just tell the funeral director we're en route, slow things up. So by the time we got there, and I didn't know this funeral director, he's walking toward me, and the canopy is already covered. Well, the pastor already started, and me and the other honor guard guy is supposed to be in there. So I looked at the funeral director. I said, hey, just describe to me what the person looks like in the front row that's going to get the flag. And he said his exact words, tall, skinny guy. I said, okay. So we walked on in there. We didn't want to interrupt the pastor. And we're standing there, so I'm glancing, and there's 2 tall, skinny guys in the front row. So I thought, okay, process of elimination here. The one sitting in the middle shows dominance. I'm going to gamble. Oh, no. I bent down and gave him the flag, and he went. I stood up, took 2 steps to the side, and gave it to the other guy.
That's funny. There's a funeral that you did the service for not too long ago that I find to be an interesting story. Korea, I believe, is the war. The person had been MIA for several years.
POW.
Can you talk about that one?
Yes, I got a call. This gentleman was a POW for 72 years from the Korean War. And I found out more information about it, but the family asked if I would officiate the funeral. But what was different about this one is a lot of things that was different about it. But he had a younger brother and a sister, but they was so young when he got drafted, they don't even remember him. So the sister I know. So the family asked if I would officiate the funeral. And I'm sitting there thinking, what do I say? He's been missing for 72 years.
Now, how did they? So, just to pause that for a second, how did they figure out who this person was?
So what they do, and I didn't know either until all this, I got educated on all of this. And December 1st of 1950, him and two other guys were kidnapped and got put into a prison camp in Korea. And he ended up, and probably the other two, they starved him and beat him to death, is what they did. And so December 1 of 1950, he was killed. March of 51, just 3 months later, um, they found his remains. They didn't know who they were though, because there was three different sets of remains. His body was all in contact. He had a broken jaw and two broken fingers, but everything else was there. So what they do in a situation like that, which I never knew before, they send all them remains to Hawaii, and they sit in this great big warehouse. And there's no way of showing favoritism by you saying, "Hey, my uncle's here." They'll go point him off the shelf because nobody know who anybody is, and it's such a long process. So his bones sat there from 1956 is when they found him. I'm sorry, 1956 they sent the remains to Hawaii. They didn't get to him till 2022.
Wow.
And there's so many thousands and thousands more there because it takes so long to do that. There's a temporary burial thing. So this particular gentleman had an escort, military escort from Hawaii to Reese Funeral Home in Ottumwa, Iowa. It was so cool. I mean, I was limited because there wasn't a whole lot of stories except for the family gave me a booklet that the government gave them. So I have a copy, and the family has a copy, and the military has a copy. They're the only people that have a copy of this, and it has the very first letter. "We regret to inform you that your son is a POW in North Korea," and they ended up doing updates and would send another letter every now and then. And it was just so interesting. It's so emotional. You can't help but get wrapped up in it. You have to walk away for a while to clear your head to come back. And now I'm not much on technology, but I like the technology of that can finally get some closure, you know. But I told him at the funeral, I said, and the place was packed naturally, and I said, "This is the only funeral you're going to be at where no one knew him. Not one person in there knew him. Isn't that crazy?"
That's weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
With all of the funerals that you've been to, making these friendships, and then losing those friends, what's and you've answered it partially, but what's the drive to keep doing that?
It it's become a passion because I would have never dreamt that this was what I was going to be when I was an alcoholic and college football didn't work out and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. It's I there's certain things that we do we're called to do. And there's a difference. When I coach football, there's a part of that I'm called to do, but it's not, and I have the passion for it. But this here, I know I'm called to do. So if you're doing what the Lord wants you to do down here on earth, you're going to have struggles, you know. But it, I think I would have a harder time handling it if I don't bounce right back. Now, if someone passes away at a nursing home and I got attached to, which I most of them, I can't go back for like a week. I just can't. You know, it's still too raw or whatever, especially if I officiated it. But then it don't take long. As soon as you go back, I'll ask somebody or they'll come up, "Hey, so and so just moved in. You might want to go check him out." And then it starts all over again. It's
Okay.
kind of like a roller coaster ride, but um, I'm blessed that he picked me when he could have picked anybody to do it.
Yeah.
So
What is it that you want people to know? Um, you know, you've said multiple times here, everybody has a story, and that story needs to be told. So, um, out of all of the people that you have talked to, what's one piece of advice, lesson, whatever that is, that you think that the general public should know about?
I would say that we all know we're going to die. We just don't plan to die. We don't think about it till the time comes. People say, "Well, I can't afford life insurance." You can. You just don't want to pay for something that you may have to wait 40 years for. you know, I'm so blessed with our family too. We started doing family dinners about 6, 7 years ago. We always met on holidays, and it was a holiday that time. And I had already talked to Martha a couple nights before, and I said we should start having family dinners once a week. So I called the family together before we ate, and I said I've been talking to Martha about this, and I think that we as a family we're going to start having family dinners once a week. I said I deal with death almost weekly. And I don't want to be one of them families the next time we get together is when one of us passes away. And it by far has been so much better than we would have ever dreamt. Now, hey, we're just dysfunctional just like everybody else. We have our moods, our opinions on things, but the cousins are getting closer now than they ever would have been if we didn't do it,
Mm-hmm.
and the daughters don't have to cook that night. And it's a true blessing. So, I suppose always have a reminder, but because every time someone passes away, you've heard it, I've heard it. Like, man, I should have went and visited more.
Mm-hmm.
The last time I seen them, I kept telling myself I need to, we have time, and I don't mean that in a bad way, and I'm not saying that because of what I do, but is we really do have time, and I've shared it at funerals before. I said every one of you guys had time to be at the visitation last night. If you leave here today and one of your children, God forbid, gets in a bad accident and gets airlifted to Iowa City, you're going to have time to go to Iowa City. It's a priority, and I understand why we don't have it. There's stuff that I should do daily, and I don't. I think about it every now and then, get halfway in the mood, but I don't do it. But appreciate life, because a lot of times, if you chase money, you're never going to be happy. I don't need a whole lot of money. I'm blessed. We're wise with the money that we have, but I don't need a whole lot of money. We grew up and didn't have much, so we don't desire to go do this, that, or whatever. And I don't care that people do, but is that truly making you happy? You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? It when I tell people when I go into a nursing home, one of the things I like best, not one of them has ever talked politics. Not one. Because
Because
when
at
it
that
comes,
point in time, it doesn't matter anymore.
yeah, and it well, what do we do? That we still argue over something we've been arguing about for 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, 80 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what is it? It's just wearing us down. And we're more divided now than we was even during Vietnam. It's because of, but anyway, so that's why I don't get into that stuff. But when I'm there, I forget the outside world. Even for a short time. I can't stay in one place long. This is really long for me to be in one place. But and I do, and then people said, "Oh, that is so nice that you do that." I go, "No, it blesses me." They think I bless them, and I probably do to a certain degree. It blesses me more now because it almost gives me the energy I need to get back out into the world again. Because if I'm not out in there, I don't feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Before I got on the city council, one of the main reasons I do, and I'll share it when they have their little get things, or this Tuesday night, my last meeting, is one of my main goals was to show people light in a dark world. And I hope I did that. And if not, I'll get better at it. But that's my goal every day. I pray and I ask God, show me somebody to encourage or something. And that's simple to do and it don't cost nothing. Open the door for somebody you don't know. We as people, we're very different, even though we think we got it going on. If if you're at a gas station and you're getting gas and you don't know the person next to you or right across from you, really good chance you're not even going to give them a greeting of the day. If you go on vacation and we'll say you're out in Colorado at a gas station and you're getting gas and you look right across the way and there's someone with an Iowa plate,
Mm-hmm.
you're running over there. What city are you from? I'm
Yeah.
from Iowa. We won't even do it in our own town. you know. And going back to the story thing, it's just an example. We'll bring up city council for a moment. If half the people at a meeting, their goal for the next meeting to meet one person on the other side chair just to hear their story. I don't care if it's 15, 20 minutes. What happens when we get to know people is when I got to know you more is when I heard part of your story. That's where our friendship started. Our friendship didn't start because we're on the city council together. Our friendship started because we got to know one another. And once you know someone's story, you ever notice it's an instant bond.
Yeah.
You look at them different, you treat them different, you know. And I treat what I do as a chaplain a lot like I did it in the military and when I got saved. In the military, they didn't have to tell you once you raised your right hand and signed on the dotted line that it's no longer about you. It's about the person to your left and to your right. And it's the same way when I got saved. It was no longer about me. It's about the people that are lost or in a dark world, just for encouragement. You know, I like ministering to the homeless people. You know, I don't pull over every time. I pull over when I'm led to pull over, you know, because they have a story.
Sure. Awesome. Anything else you want to add?
No. I think one more thing and then we can close up.
Sure.
I want the people to know, I'm preaching without preaching here. I am so blessed to hear all these stories, but them stories don't come about if I didn't pray 3 nights in a row that week. It would have never happened. And you would have never been interviewing me for being a council member. You know what I mean? And what I do, it's not special. And I don't want people to say, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. I don't do it. It's just what the Lord wants me to do to guide me. And I've met so many people along the way, even though I don't know a lot of them very long, you know. The very first funeral I went to, this guy, and then we'll close, I promise. And I only got to talk to him 2 times out of the 4, you know, and that was the first one. So I'm sitting there thinking, praying, if this is what you want me to do, God, I don't want no part of it. This is going to hurt. But he was setting me up for all the relationships and the friendships that I've built along the way. And I'm still kind of all about it. You know, why me when he could have picked anybody, you know?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I just want to thank you so much for watching my video. If you find these videos inspiring, if you like hearing the stories of everybody that we bring onto the show, please go to the page, like and subscribe, and share it with all of your friends. It would mean so much to me and all of the future people that we'll have on the show. So again, please go to the YouTube page, like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.